me welcome Father Rose.
Thank you, Kara, and thank you for your warm welcome. But it's cooler out this evening, which is wonderful. It has been very warm, hasn't it? Just a little promotion here. As Kara said, I'm at Christ the King Retreat House. Do you know where that is? Over on Brookford Road, up on the other hill. Syracuse is a city of hills. And we have a summer picnic for seniors, August 15th, which is, if you're Catholic, it's a holy day. So we start with a Mass, but you don't have to be there for a Mass. And then we have a little luncheon afterwards. So if you'd like to come to that, there's some information on the table in the back, and also other programs that we have. We'd love to have you there, just even to come over and sit in the backyard. Right now there's 50 people there for a week in silence. And they long for the silence. There's 40 of them who are religious sisters from mostly all over New York State, Buffalo, Rochester, Ogdensburg, Syracuse, and there's 10 lay people. And they come to hear presenters, some of them, or others just come for what is called a directed retreat, where they meet one-on-one with a spiritual director to talk about what's going on in their life, some of which is aging, because most of them are in their 70s or 80s, maybe some 60s, those are the young people. And there's always concerns or issues that we have, right? And where is God, and what is God inviting them to at this stage of their lives? And we might ask those questions too, okay? So some of you, my name is Father John Rose. Some of you might know my brother Jesus Rose. But regardless, that's pretty bad for this time of day. But regardless of what denomination or faith or none that we all have a spirituality. Now that's a big fancy word, but spirituality is about the essence of who we are, about our spirit, about our soul, okay? And so, as you know, as we age, and we're aging in place here, right? And there's an inner beauty that happens, so we might be losing some of that outer beauty, some of us, but what's being formed and shaped is this inner beauty that we want to discover, and that's part of what's happening in the aging process, okay? And so, if you didn't know how old you really are, suppose you're in your 70s or 80s or 90s, or anybody in their hundreds here, we won't tell anybody, right? Okay, congratulations. But if you didn't know how old you were, think for a moment, how old do you think you are? Sometimes you might feel like you're 100, but do you always feel your age, your chronological age? I'm 72. So I think I feel at times like I'm 35 or 40. My energy is not as high, nor the desire to work as hard is not there. But I don't think of myself as a 70-year-old person. I know when my parents went into their 70s, I went, boy, they're pretty old. But 70 is not old anymore, nor is 80 or 90. I'm sure some of you, if you're in those ages, are pretty active. You're here, you walked down here this evening. So chronologically, we're told that if you were born in 1900 or so, the average expectation was 47. Now, we heard a presenter at Christ the King a couple of weeks ago who said that if you're born now, you can live to 147. You might not want to, huh? So there's a Jewish, it all depends on what your health is like, I'm sure, I understand there's a Jewish saying on a birthday that may you be blessed and live to 120. Now, that would be great if there's blessings at 120, but it could be a curse depending on your health, huh? So it's all a matter of attitude. And aging usually comes in two flavors, serene and sour. So serene are people, I'm sure you might be one of them or you know them, are very much comfortable with themselves, with their age, they've accepted that, they're calm, as opposed to someone who's sour, who's always grumpy, who's always complaining, who's negative, who's resentful, who's bitter. You might know some of those people. What happens when you hang around with people who are negative?
You tend to become that way yourself.
You become that way yourself. It's contagious, isn't it? You pick it up. It's infectious. So you want to stay away from them, you know? So you want to cultivate hanging around people who are serene and becoming serene yourself. You know, not that we don't have certain regrets or angers that we have to work through and let go of, but aging is about becoming this new person. It's a rebirth, and that's what we're going to talk a little bit about tonight. But first, I want to read something I picked up on the internet a couple of years ago. Do you realize that the only time in our lives when we like to get old is when we're kids? If you're less than 10 years old, you're so excited about aging that you think in fractions. How old are you? I'm 4.5. You're never 36.5. You're 4.5 going on 5. That's the key. So now you get into your teens, now they can't hold you back. You jump to the next number or even a few ahead. How old are you? I'm gonna be 16. You could be 13, but hey, you're gonna be 16. And then the greatest day of your life, you become 21. Even the words sound like a ceremony. You become 21, yes. But then you turn 30. Ooh, what happened there? Makes you sound like sour milk. He turned. We had to throw him out. There's no fun now. You're just a sour dumpling. What's wrong? What's changed? Remember when I turned 30, I went jogging and I pulled a muscle in my leg. I went, uh-oh, is this what it's about? You become 21, you turn 30, then you're pushing 40. Whoa, put on the brakes. It's all slipping away. Before you know it, you reach 50 and your dreams are gone. But wait, you make it to 60. You didn't think you would. Remember those days? Did you think you'd make 60? So you become 21, turn 30, push 40, reach 50, and make it to 60. You built up so much speed that you hit 70. After that, it's a day-by-day thing. You hit Tuesday, July 17th, 2018. You get into your 80s, and every day is a complete cycle. You hit lunch, you turn 4:30, you reach bedtime. And it doesn't end there into the 90s. You start going backwards. I was just 92. Then a strange thing happens. If you make it over 100, you become a little kid again. I'm 100.5. May you all make it to a healthy 100.5. How old are you, sir?
106 months.
See, that's wisdom. That's what we're going to be talking about here. The spirituality of aging is moving from aging to saging. Saging. Anybody know what a sage is? What's a sage? A wise person. Okay? So we get in, these are called our wisdom years. That's what we want to reframe it as. Now, I offer these, what we call spirituality of aging days at the retreat house, and I think I've done 5 or 6 of them. And we get anywhere from 25 to 35 people from the ages of early 60s to maybe 92. And we sit in a circle, and the reason we do that is because I call it a wisdom circle. It goes back to Native American spirituality. And there's a lot of wisdom in that circle, and there's a lot of wisdom in this group, isn't there? Absolutely. Because of our life experiences. And unfortunately, eldering, let me just say there's a difference between becoming elderly and spiritual elder. Anybody can become elderly. Okay, you can just sit around and you become old. But an elder is something conscious, becoming consciously an elder. An elder are the wisdom peoples. If you read the Christian scriptures, you know that Jesus emphasized the elder people. So remember the story, there's a story where the woman was caught in adultery and she disobeyed the Mosaic law. And so the woman was caught, the man got scot-free. You know, nothing happened to him. It takes two to tangle, doesn't it? But they brought this woman up in front of the entire town in the middle of the circle, and she had to be humiliated. She was probably kneeling there shaken. They probably cut her hair off. Maybe they stripped her breast. They called her all sorts of shameful names. They had all these teens were there, kids, all these men, ready to stone her to death. And Jesus comes along, and they want to set him up for a trap. They go, Jesus, in the Mosaic laws it says, if a woman is caught in the act of adultery, they should be condemned to death. What do you say? And what does he do? He kneels down in silence. He's comfortable with silence. Okay? When we get older, we have a lot more silence. So he's comfortable with silence, and he gets up, and in his wisdom, and he's only 33 here, maybe or younger, he says, let the first among you who doesn't have any sin cast the first stone. And beginning with who? Who drops their stones? The older ones. Beginning with the elders, they drop their stones. Why do you think the elders dropped their stones first? They were smart. Why were they smart?
They've been there.
They'd been there. They were sinners. They knew who they were, and they knew who they were not, too, right? They'd lived longer, so they were comfortable with their humanness. Part of being human is we're imperfect, right? And we're broken and we're wounded. All of us have sufferings in our lives, things that happen to us. Yet our woundedness can also be gifts. They can yield the gift that we need. But because of this, because they knew who they were, they dropped their stones and they went away. And the younger ones followed them. So the elders taught them something, okay? Sometimes, I remember when I was 19, I knew everything. Everything. Even more than my parents did. And now somehow I got more dumb as I got older, okay? I forgot everything. Or I didn't know, I thought I knew everything, but I didn't know anything really. So we're comfortable perhaps, not only just with talking about our strengths, or our bravado, or what, but often we can share our vulnerabilities. We become more vulnerable. And that's a gift, to be more vulnerable, because if we are vulnerable, now you have to be cautious who we're vulnerable with, because we can all be hurt, and probably all of us have been hurt to one degree or another level. But vulnerable is being intimate with somebody I trust. A word of intimacy is into me see. If I reveal something about myself, especially about my feelings, you get to know me a lot more as if I just stay in my head and I talk about the weather and sports and politics and that kind of stuff. That's a safe area, and we talk about that. But if I want to form a personal relationship, I can be more vulnerable. So the wisdom circle came from Native American spirituality, and this is a statement by Black Elk, who was a Sioux holy man. You've noticed that everything an Indian does is in a circle, and that is because the power of the world always works in circles, and everything tries to be round. The sky is round, and I've heard that the earth is round like a ball, and so are all the stars. The wind, in its greatest power, whirls. Birds make their nests in circles, for theirs is the same religion as ours. Even the seasons form a great circle in their changing, and always come back again to where they were. The life of a human is a circle from childhood to childhood, and so it is in everything where power moves. So when we're children, we come into the world with nothing, huh? And as we get older, there's a certain stripping that happens, right? Sometimes we don't have a choice over that, sometimes we do. All of you, I suspect, have had to downsize, haven't you? To move into the Nottingham. It's a lovely place, but you couldn't bring everything with you, right? It wouldn't fit in your room, I bet. So in the first half of our life, or longer, it's about attachments. It seems like we need a lot of things once we graduate from high school, or even in our Western culture. It's a very consumeristic, capitalistic culture, isn't it? And oftentimes we're judged by what we have, or where we live, or what kind of car we drive, or all of those external kind of things. But we leave much of that behind as we get older, We leave our achievements behind, our trophies behind, our certificates behind, our titles behind. So I used to be the CEO, or I used to be the vice president of the bank, or I used to be the head nurse, or I used to be a teacher, or I used to be a police officer, I used to be a firefighter. But we leave, or a grandmother, or a parent. But we leave all those titles behind us to discover, who am I really? Now, who am I as John when I don't have all these titles, or nobody knows how important I am? Right? When I just introduce myself as John, or Mary, or Sue, or Robert. So, who am I? Who is the person who God knows me as? That's what we're called to discover in our aging years. Because what do you have time, yeah, I just told you. What do you have now? See if you can guess. What do you have now that you didn't have when you were younger, when you were working? Time. Oh, good answer. We have a lot more time, perhaps too much time sometimes. What do I do with it all? And in our Western culture again, and to be very sexist, especially as men, we oftentimes take our identity from what we do. So if I can't do anymore, what's my purpose? I'm useless. No, I can't do this anymore. Well, our productive years are over, perhaps, huh? Our sexual productive years are over, certainly. And our work days are over. We don't have to work anymore. So maybe it's not about working, maybe it's not about doing, maybe it's about being. So it's becoming a process of being who I am. Because now I have time to reflect upon this, and the new paradigm is going from just getting old and diminishment and isolation and just the same old same thing every day, to a new paradigm. Now, paradigm is a fancy word. It means a new model, and sometimes people have to kind of we get stubborn, I remember when I was in Utica about 9 years ago as a pastor, Governor Cuomo came to Utica when he was first made governor. I think he toured the state and went around Utica, and I went to hear him speak at night, and he said, well, I heard a lot about Utica, about the good old days, and the good old days, and the good old days, and the good old days. And I'm sure the good old days were good, but they probably weren't all good, but we happen to remember the good and forget the bad. But we're not living in the past now, we're in the present. So who are we now? Those good old days have shaped us, and there could have been some bad old days in there too. They've shaped us and formed us, so we've become the person that we are today. And so David Brooks, who's a journalist for the New York Times, has a book out called, I forget the name of the title, but he says our resume talks are different from our eulogy talks. And our resume that we submit for jobs, or we might give at a graduation, we talk about all our accomplishments, huh? I've done this, 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 and I can do this, this, and this. But at our funeral, and you've been to many funerals, I'm sure, and you hear eulogies, they don't talk so much about a person's accomplishments, do they? Don't they talk about the kind of person that person became? My grandmother, she was so sweet. I loved to sit and hear her tell the old stories. My grandfather was a very kind old man. He was always there for me, and I could always go to him. Those are the kinds of stories that we tell. That's our legacy. People who, in our age, now are called to consciously become an elder, a wise person, discover who we are, to find out the legacy that we want to leave behind us, not your financial goods, okay? What's the legacy? You want to be called a person of compassion or integrity or of caring, and to be a person of service. So how do we serve? Even here, how do you serve? Now there may be some people, I think you have a nice balance here. I haven't lived here, but I know some people who do live here. So there's a nice balance between having the privacy of your room, huh? and then you have meals together, presumably. So you can have some social time and you can have some private time. I'm an introvert, so I like quiet time. I'm comfortable with alone time and solitude. Some of you also may be, but some of you may not be. You might always want to be with people. But some people might feel alone. So as a way of being of service, could I periodically knock on somebody's room and say, on door, and say, hey, could I come in for a visit, or you want to go out here to the lounge for a cup of coffee or whatever, have a conversation, okay? And loneliness is part of the journey, regardless of how old we are, whether you're happily married, unhappily married, divorced, widowed, a pope, a priest, young, old. Loneliness is part of the human condition. It doesn't mean anything's wrong with you at all, okay? Nothing's wrong with you, except that you're human, okay? Is it okay to be human? I hope so, because we all are. And so loneliness can be an invitation. You know, we have a choice. We can sit in my room and say, I feel so lonely today. I hate loneliness. I'm so depressed. I can't stand it. I don't know what my purpose is in life. I just have to die. And, we can kind of cycle down, okay? And you can give yourself permission for a pity party for 10 minutes, okay? Just sulk, just cry, just scream, just hit the wall. I don't know if you have a scream room here or not, but you know, sometimes those are good rooms to have. And because we feel powerless sometimes, right? Or you can say, you know, I think I'm going to go out and invite somebody for a cup of coffee. We're going to walk around the circle here, you know. I usually bike from Christ the King, and I come up your road here sometimes, not as quick as I used to. But I see people out here walking a lot, you know. And you got some nice porches, screened-in porches or not screened in. Beautiful view here, huh? But to go outside and get some fresh air. Now, these people on retreat this week, if you've been to the retreat house, I want to say, you're just welcome to sit in the backyard. People go out there for an hour or two and they just sit. They love it because it's so serene. They listen to the birds. They feel the breeze, like there's a beautiful breeze tonight. Or they go in the pool, or they put their feet in the water, or they walk around the grounds. One lady today said, you know, I can't believe all the colors of the trees. I think so many different varieties of trees. I think the rain brought them out or something. And they feel this wonderful calm, interior calm. The Spirit, what we call the Holy Spirit in theology, the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, for those of you who are Christian. The Spirit's gift is calm, it's serenity. I live in the city, a very noisy part of the city, and especially around 4th of July, I guess it's legal to buy fireworks in New York State now. They shoot them off to 2 o'clock in the morning. The other morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, I'm still awake. I drove around and I said, you know what? Some of us had to go to work tomorrow. It's time to go to bed. They go, oh yes, sir, we're just going now. I said, well, thank you. But sometimes I come up and sleep at the retreat house because the only thing I hear is birds. And it's good to try to be comfortable with silence. That's how we get into spiritual eldering. Contemplation, meditation, just whether you do that in your room, whether you do it on your porch, whether you just sit. I don't know if you have chairs on the property here, or bring a chair out, or some of you have some nice walkers with a seat on it. Just be. Practice being. And sometimes you might get a little restless, or you get a little monkey mind. You know what a monkey mind is? You sit down and it's like there's monkeys in there, all these things you got to think about. And but it takes, after 20 minutes, you kind of settle down, and after a while, you may not think anything's happening there, but maybe the rest of your day goes okay because you're centered, you're focused, you're calm. The Spirit is working in there, okay? So this is a grandparenting time as we age here, okay? Whether you're literally a grandparent or not. You can think of a Pope Francis. Isn't he like a grandfather? He's got a wonderful, mellow spirit about himself. They say before he became Archbishop or even Pope, there's rarely any pictures of him smiling. He was kind of serious, always serious. But something happened when he became Pope. And now you always see him smiling, except when he's really pretty angry at abuse or violence that's happening in our world. And then he speaks of the justice of God and the injustice of those who are marginalized or vulnerable or taken advantage of. But there can be a wonderful presence about this eldering process if we pay attention to it. So now they used to talk about the 2/2 of life, okay? And now they talk about the 3/3 of life. The first third is up to 35, the second third is up to 60, and then the third third is 60 and beyond. But now they even talk about 3/3 of the third phase of life, okay? So from 60 to 74 is your young old, okay? So I'm a young old person. If you're 75 to 84, you're old, and if you're 85 to whatever, you're the oldest old, okay? Now, that's not a judgment, that's not a negative thing. You are becoming the wise ones, okay? The older you become, you're mellowing like a fine wine. Why do they make wines in cracked barrels? I don't know, but our skin dries out, doesn't it? So we're kind of cracked in some respects, it's not as supple, all that. And we have wrinkles, but it's really about going the journey within, okay? It's no longer the journey outward of trying to acquire all these possessions or things or whatever. It's divesting of all of those. As I said, it's a stripping, and sometimes that happens to our bodies. It does happen to our bodies. We lose our hearing. I have 2 hearing aids. We lose our hair in some cases. We lose the color of our hair. Our bodies tend to sag a little bit more. We don't have any control over that. Gravity has its own pull. But it's the journey within to find who am I in this inner being that I was created like as a baby, as a child. So this full circle, I was created as this wonderful baby, okay? And I've heard it said, and you probably heard it said before, when we're born, we cry, but everybody rejoices and says, oh, it's a boy, it's a girl. And then when we die, we rejoice as we wake up into this new whatever, but people cry and mourn our loss, okay? So it's getting back to be simple, this stripping of telling us what's really of the essence. It's not about things, it's not about our externals that define us when we're younger. It's more about relationships, and it's living in the present, in the here and the now. Okay? Because that's all we have. We look forward to the future, but our history is longer than our future, isn't it? And we usually live our lives, we live our lives forward like this, but they take on meaning by looking back on them, don't they?
Yes.
We say, oh, something happens in my life, and we go, why did that happen? I was talking to a Jesuit recently, and he said, when I was a younger guy, maybe 20, 30 years ago, I had these neurological problems. I was in the hospital for 30 years, and my legs went numb. I still have problems, but I had a lot of pain at that time. But it's given me so much more empathy and compassion toward others. And I'm speaking to nurses now, and I'm going like, oh my goodness, I was so grateful for nurses who took care of me. So I can be so supportive of them and hold them up as what, in terms of what their calling is. So this is like a second calling. Our initial calling was maybe to whatever our career might have been, or our work, or whether we were called to be married, or called to be single, or called to be a priest, or whatever. The second calling is God saying, you are my beloved daughter. You are my beloved son. And I love you as you are. Not so much for what you do, but for who you are, just the way you are. Billy Joel, you know that name? I have to be careful. When I talk to younger people, they go, Linda Ronstadt. Who's she? You remember Linda Ronstadt?
Yeah.
Oh, thank God. Because when I talk about shame, I usually say bad shame is Linda Ronstadt, who says, you're no good, you're no good, you're no good. Maybe you're no good. And when I say good shame, it helps us change. It's Billy Joel. I love you just the way you are. Don't go changing. I made you that way. The danger comes when we compare ourselves with others, right?
Right.
And we say, oh, I don't have that gift, I don't have that gift, I don't have that gift, I wish I had that gift. No, you don't have that gift because you have your own gift. Whatever comes easy to you and natural is your gift, right? So it might be your personality, it might be your friendliness, it might be your approachability. That's your gift. So, you know, we want to practice contemplation. And part of aging is coming to terms with our mortality, isn't it? And we might try to keep that in the future, but I know it probably starts around 50. You know, we have so many choices before the age of 50. When we turn 50, we're a little bit more conscious of the clock ticking, okay? And every decade change. It seems we can ignore it for 10 years, and then the next decade, it's like, well, now I'm 60. I remember turning 60, I'm at 60. And then not too late after that, I got this invitation for a 50th anniversary. I said, oh, who's celebrating a 50th anniversary? It's the 50th anniversary of my high school graduation. I went, are you kidding me? I couldn't believe it, you know? And then when I turned 70, actually I felt pretty good about myself, although I realized work was not speaking to my heart anymore. My heart is in a different place, especially when the priest here can identify with this, the administrative stuff, or if in your profession you have a lot of administrative stuff. I don't mind being a priest, I love being a priest, but it's all that other stuff that you have to deal with, right?
Right.
So your heart begins to take you in a different direction. It's always important to pay our attention to our hearts, okay? We just had Mass at the retreat house, and we had this song called Be Still. You know, it's taken from Psalm 40, isn't it? Be still and know that I am God. Be still and know that I am God. God is the great stillness. The great stillness. So when we become still and silent, we can become like God. So we are becoming mini gods. At Mass one time, a couple of weeks ago, I said, what language does God speak? I got all sorts of answers. He speaks Jewish, Arabic, whatever. And I don't know what Jewish sounds like, but you know, I think they meant Hebrew. But anyhow, I said, I think God speaks silence. That's the language of, because God understands silence. That's what heaven is like, comfortable with silence. Those of you who are married, as you're married longer and longer, you don't have to talk as much, do you? You can be comfortable in each other's presence. You almost know what the other one's going to say, from what I understand, right? She always says that, right? Huh? Who are you pointing to? Oh, yeah. Okay. Silence is the language of God. So aging, though, is entering like a foreign land as we get older. We've never been there before, right? So remember Abraham when he was, I forget, 65 or 70? God says, Abraham. He says, yes. He says, go forth. He said, yes, Lord. He followed him, but he didn't give him any directions. But he went forth. It was an invitation to trust. Can we trust that God is with us in this experience? Now, if you have a religion, or if you have no religion, or you practice, or you don't practice, that's okay. But it's about your spirit, and I guess I talked about God in terms of my experience of God. Somebody asked Terre de Chardin, this great theologian who wrote these long sentences, why do you believe in God? He says, I pray. That's how I know there's a God. I experience God in my prayer. So there's more time to pray You might call it meditation or contemplation, but there's also time for prayer, sitting in silence. And it's more about listening. You don't have to use a lot of words or memorize formulas. I mean, you can say the Our Fathers and the Hail Marys or whatever. But at our age, it's more about listening and allowing God to speak to our hearts. Getting out of our heads. Especially we who are guys tend to live in our heads, but God speaks to our hearts. So what are your feelings like? And sometimes I belong to a priest support group. We get together once a month, there's 6 of us, and we talk about what's happened in the last month, okay? We go around this, we sit in a circle, we go around this circle. What's a good thing that happened? What's a challenging thing that you're facing, or whatever? So there's no reason why you couldn't invite 2 or 3 others, or 4 or 5 others to sit in a group maybe once a month or every other month, and just talk about whatever you want to talk about, but you can talk about the aging experience. What do you like about aging? What are the blessings you've experienced in your life? What are some of your fears? What don't you like about aging? If we had time, and we were a smaller group, we could open this up a little bit, to talk about those kind of things. But we all have those feelings, but sometimes we don't talk about it. And just to be able to know that somebody else has the same experience makes us feel like I'm not alone. That we're on this journey together, right? Yeah. So I would encourage you to do that, however that happens, just for an hour, maybe less if you want to, but it might be a little awkward when you first start, but invite some friends, somebody you know or somebody you don't know. It's a great opportunity to get to know somebody who lives on your block or across the hallway or something like that on a different level, okay? But it has to be, we have to do our inner work. If there's people in their 70s and it has to be all about themselves, they have to be the center of attention and everything like that, they haven't done their inner homework. Right? It's not about ourselves. It's about something bigger than ourselves. Whatever that bigger is for you, It's about becoming this beloved person, leaving a legacy, and being of service. God knows there's many volunteer opportunities. I don't know how many of you go out on a regular basis, but even here at the Nottingham, I suspect there's volunteer opportunities. I don't know. But I'm in one group. I had a group of 3 80-year-olds. They came up from Cortland, and we were talking about loneliness. And one lady says, well, when I feel lonely, I call it the Red Cross or the hospital and say, you need any volunteers today? Yeah, I'll be right over. So it's about this energy, I guess, of being something bigger than myself. And also in prayer, paying attention to how have you encountered God in your life, if you're a believer? Pope Francis talks about encounters. All you need is one in your lifetime to give your life purpose. If you get older and you have a purpose, it makes life more meaningful. You don't have a purpose, it can be very long, can't it? But sometimes those experiences of God, they take us by surprise. We can't make them happen, okay? So one time, when I was in my 30s, I went over to Boston to study, and I was living with a group of Augustinians, maybe 20 of us, and we all took turns cooking. First time I ever cooked was for 20 guys. Pretty life-threatening. Gotta do this meal, live with them the next day. And so anyhow, I used to go for a walk to talk to Jesus about a half an hour before mealtime. So I'm taking this walk, and in class they're talking about share your feelings with God and develop this prayer relationship and be very honest. So I said, well, honestly, God, I'm pretty angry with you. I'm very disappointed. I haven't experienced you at all in the last couple of weeks. I don't know where you are, but you're not in my prayer at all. And just then I became aware it was almost dinner time, so I started to walk real fast. And just then, what do you know, I experienced Jesus walking right next to me, but really, really pokey, slow. So I got the point. If I wanted to experience God, I had to slow down. It wasn't so much God was absent from me, I was absent from God. So perhaps it was because I shared my feelings that God presented himself. But ever since then, I've learned the power of slow. Now, when we age, we go slower, don't we?
Oh, yeah.
Oh, yeah. It takes a longer time to get ready, right, for the day. And we used to have that fast gas and fast internet and fast cars and fast. Now, there's a power, believe me, there's a power in going slow. And it's about being, it's about accepting. It's not that something's wrong. I wish I could go faster. If you go faster, you might fall or something, right? So you see more things. Now, I understand Buddhists practice walking, conscious walking, okay? I understand the 12 boys that were rescued over in that cave, they were all Buddhist. And there's two things that helped get them out there besides the rescue, was that they contemplated every day as Buddhists, and they showed compassion to each other. So meditation leads us to be compassionate people, and we share that energy with each other. So it's not about us, it's about being present to others, being present to me, being present to my God, whoever your God is, and being present to others. So it's like a tripod, like on a milking stool, you know. If you were milking cows, all three of those are important, because if one is missing, you're going to fall over. So if I pray, it's going to strengthen my relationship with God, and also I'm going to feel better myself, and it's going to make me more caring for other people. And perhaps if I'm more caring for people, I might be more good to myself, and da-da-da-da. But they're all connected there, you know. But getting in touch with this, what we call, again, this elder energy. The more I know myself, the more I accept my humanness, the more fully human I become. And that's really what it means to be holy. Holy is becoming fully myself. You know, we see a lot of statues, at least in the Christian religion or Catholic Church, you know, and many of them are like this. They're kind of pious, they're looking up someplace nowhere. And they are very holy, but do any of you know anybody who looks like those statues? I mean, I have a couple statues myself, but, you know, I think we ought to have statues of people who are cleaning the floor, or a nurse who's serving patients, or, you know, a housekeeper or something like that. Aren't those holy people?
Yes.
Human people? That's what a saint is. Pope Francis talks a little bit about that. He's got a new document out about the call to holiness. Everybody's called to be holy. Everybody. So our culture kind of tends to celebrate staying in the saddle, you know, and being productive without being much contemplation. Always working. There's an addiction to work. You know, even people in retirement say, "Gee, I'm so busy now. I don't know how now I had time to work." Well, that may or may not be good, to be always busy, because it can keep us from ourselves, a distraction from self. Work keeps us from ourself, from our deeper self, let's put it that way, okay? And who am I? That's one thing you can talk about in your circle. You can talk about what maybe you used to do, that's easy to talk about, but then say, well, who have I become? What are some of the experiences that have shaped me and formed me the way I am, okay? And can you accept yourself and love yourself just the way you are? Abraham Heschel, are you familiar with that name? Great Jewish author, said, gave this biblical view of the life cycle, that 7 years equals 1 month of the life cycle. So winter is like January, March, that's infancy up to young adulthood, 21. And then April, May, and June is spring, that's 21 to 42. Summer is July, August, September. More time contacting our inner souls and our spirit, our inner selves and our spirit. And then fall, October, November, December, which is probably where most of us are, all of us are. Time for harvesting, feeling proud about what we've contributed to society. Maybe you've been a very good parent. You've raised a child or several children, or you know, and now we have to close the door, close the gates to to our previous life and enter the door to elderhood. Different cultures have different rituals for doing this. Now, if you're Jewish, tell me if I'm wrong or not, but I read someplace that the Jewish mother, when the last child is married, the other women surround her, put her on a throne, put a crown on her head, and dance and applaud and say, "Nice job. Your job is finished. Now you have time for yourself, to develop your inner self, to become," it's like a rebirth for women. Okay? Women live longer, don't they? I think we're mostly women in this group.
It seems so.
Huh?
It sure seems so.
It seems so. I think men, we tend to work ourselves to death, you know? We're driven. Work. But, so for men, it's important to let go of this addiction to work, to defining ourselves by what we do, and reconnect to this sacred dimension of life. Now the Japanese women, I understand, when they turn 60, that's the line for retirement for them, to move into this new age. They all dress in red, and as a signal to the rest of the culture that I've completed the phase of productivity of my life. And in other cultures, they become forest dwellers when they're 70. I forget what culture, but they tend to wear black. Say that's over with. And now they go through this period of study or discernment. What do I want to do or become for the rest of my life? They go back to school. So Oasis, are you familiar with Oasis for elders?
Yes.
Did you go to those classes?
Yes.
Now those are classes, and sometimes they're kind of cognitive stuff. But in this culture, it's really discerning what does it mean to be an elder, and what is the gift I want to give to other people. How can I best do that? So many people in eldering take up painting, artistry, photography, music, poetry. There's more time for reading some good spirituality books, spiritual books. I'm sure the priest here could probably recommend some of those. But good to feed our souls with beauty. You have a beautiful setting here overlooking the hills, you know? Sunsets, sunrises, just to look at beauty. There was one sister at Sister St. Joseph down at Latham, Miriam Connors. She has wonderful paintings. I said, "Where do you get your ideas?" She said, "I contemplate sunrises." She looks at the sunrise, you know? One time I go to Gloucester, which is over in New England, for a retreat house, and one time I was early in the morning because the sun literally rises out of the ocean, and I'm looking at this on a bench, and I go to myself, "Wow, that's beautiful." And then automatically, I seem to have this sense that Jesus was on this bench looking at me and say, "Well, yeah, but the beauty's in you." I go, "What?" And he goes, I go, "No, the beauty's out there." He says, "Yeah, but it's in you also." So that was very profoundly silenced me. So that experience happened 30 years ago, but the event happened, but the experience lives me forever. So in that quiet time, we discover beauty. So get some good artwork. You have beautiful artwork around here, that's great. And you have musical concerts here maybe. You got lectures like this, you come together. You have an exercise room, a swimming pool, all those kind of things. Those are life-giving. You want to do things that are life-giving for you. You don't have to do it for others so much. It's all about, not in a selfish sense, you know how to take care of you. Self-compassion, self-care, okay? Allowing people to care for you. So it's giving up some of that responsibility of always doing for others. I mean, religious sisters have a tough time with this because they're so used to doing. And at the retreat house, it's like, "Anything I can do? Can I polish your candle stands or wash the linen or something like that?" I go, "No, thank you, sister, but just be. God wants you to just be." So it's tough letting go, isn't it? A lot of this is about letting go. And it's surrender. And surrender is different. It's different from submission. Submission is done to us. Surrender, we have a choice. and hopefully it's going to yield wonderful fruits. But it takes time. And so we grow up in this Western culture here that's all influenced by a Puritan ethic that, always try and focus on achievement, but doesn't teach us how to enjoy the fruits of our labor. So we can say what we did, but what's the meaning of what we did? What was the impact we left on other people, huh? And you may have to do some mourning or grieving. Sometimes I talk to, especially men, who say, I was so busy, I didn't have time for my children, but I'm making it up in my spending time with my grandchildren. But you can still maybe forget, we might have to forgive ourselves. That's a big piece. So this is about forgiveness, forgiving myself, if I wasn't perfect, which none of us are, and maybe forgiving other people who may have hurt us. Doesn't necessarily have to lead to reconciliation, but can we forgive them in our own minds and hearts to free us from carrying it around, okay? Because sometimes that can drag us down, and so, but maybe in your small group. I think in a small group, the important thing I should have said is to create a safe environment. It has to be safe. You have to set some boundaries there so that whatever is said in this group stays in this group. Okay, so if I share something personal with these 4 people, and then I hear it from Mildred across the hallway, I'm going like, I'm not going back to that group again, So we have to make the agreement. This is confidential. Otherwise, it can't be a relationship of trust, okay? But we need that, even just one-on-one, or 3 people in a group. It doesn't have to be 4. If you want to do that, it's just, you don't have to do that. It's just a suggestion. A lot of people, when they get older, go into yoga. Do you have yoga here?
Yes.
Uh-huh. That's wonderful. It puts us in touch with our feelings, makes us more limber. We become one with ourselves. For some reason, I don't know why, Catholic Church is saying yoga shouldn't be allowed at retreat houses, but I've been to retreat houses where yoga is offered, and whoa, people get in touch with some deep stuff. But this is not a retreat house, so you can do it here, okay? So we want to get into this. Elder Hurd would lead us into contentment, being comfortable with who we are. Sometimes just going out into nature, as I said before. Years ago I made this vision quest for men. They also have them for women. And part of it was a 3-day weekend or experience. We had to go out into nature for 5 hours. And we had to walk through the woods. It was like, I don't know, a huge amount of woods. And allow a space to choose us. And sit down and stay in this 5-foot circumference for all 5 hours. And then they gave us 5 envelopes that you had to open when you're ready. And I went, I don't know if I can even last here 5 hours. No, I think it was from 9 o'clock to 6 o'clock. It must have been 9 hours. I went, oh my God, it's going to be a long day. All you had was water. And after an hour and a half, I went, oh, an hour and a half went by. I didn't open my first envelope. So the first envelope I opened up, it says, it's not about you. The second envelope I opened up says, you're going to die. That's a very sobering thought. Third envelope was, you're not that important. It's like, okay. And so it brings you down to the essence, like, what is it all about? But it's about being comfortable with who I am, not being judgmental, just being present. So we're one with the earth, okay? Part of it's restoring our earth. Our earth is so damaged these days. I think that's why it's so violent. It's striking back. It's like, I can't take this anymore, Somebody said, it's kind of like the dinosaurs. If we don't treat the earth with more respect, we're not going to destroy the earth. The earth is going to destroy us. Saying, you're a threat. You human species are a threat to me. I can't survive. So we have to care for the earth as we care for ourselves. And being in nature makes us realize we're part of that. The earth doesn't belong to us, we belong to the earth. That makes sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, do you have any questions? I could have opened this up a little before. So you got all the answers now? Do you know how to age? No. No, there's a lot of wisdom here. What? Does this resonate
Yes.
with what you're experiencing?
Yes.
It resonates, but it's difficult when you're challenged by others. And silence may work, but it doesn't answer the question.
Okay. Yeah, it's difficult.
To be challenged.
How challenged in what way?
Some people go on and on and on.
Well, challenging personalities, you mean, or no?
Just about anything.
Okay. Too much. There's that 12-step program. Have you heard of it for people who go on and on and on and on? But you're right. If they go on and on and on, it's like you fall asleep, you know? There has to be development of listening. Is that what you're saying? There has to be a give and take. If the person's just talking, it's like, wow, that's control. So that's challenging. And silence doesn't give you the answers. What happens when you are silent? What do you notice? Anything?
Your husband makes you angry.
Huh? Your husband makes you angry. How so?
Because I'm always talking.
Oh, when he's trying to be silent, huh? Okay. Well, and so you may have to set some parameters there, huh? Honey, can you give me 15 minutes here? From 9 to 9:15, and then you can talk, okay? But it's challenging if you're in a small apartment or room here, huh? I ran into somebody at a doctor's office the other day, and he said he's retired. I said, how was retirement? He said, it was great until my wife retired. And then both of us were in the same room together. But that just depends on the relationship. For him, it wasn't working. But yeah, so it's about respect, and setting boundaries and limits. And we all need boundaries.
Yes.
Yeah. And I'm not saying it's easy getting older, is it? Because we do face physical disabilities. We're a little weaker, we're dependent upon people. Maybe some of you have lost your driving license, you had to give up your car, give up a lot of your independence. So we have to do some mourning and grieving. We can't embrace the new unless we've really grieved. You might have to cry about this, or lament. Lamentations, lament my losses, my griefs. You've all experienced a lot of grief. Maybe some of you have all lost parents, I'm sure, perhaps spouses, children, siblings, friends. We have to grieve all that, okay? But it's about, saying goodbye to the old and welcoming the new. Somebody else want to make a comment or question? What's one thing you might take home with you tonight? Huh?
So happy they're alive and well.
Yeah,
We can
gratitude.
Every day as we wake up.
Yes.
Thank the Lord for just that moment.
Wonderful. Gratitude for being alive. We don't appreciate what it's like to walk unless we lose the ability to walk. We don't appreciate our hearing sometimes until we lose our hearing. So gratitude for what we do have, for a comfortable place like this, huh? For other people. Challenging living with other people. Everybody has a different personality, right?
Thank goodness.
Thank goodness, right? Yeah, there's a flavor there. Well, thank you so much, and you're always, like I say, there's literature on the back if you want to take anything about the retreat house, or give us a call and come over and use the pool, if you like, outside, okay? All right, pleasure. Thanks for the invitation to be here, and there's no second collection tonight either.